And joining us here this hour is City Councilman Bill Summers, who we haven't visited with in a while. How you been?
Doing fine, thank you.
Where you been? Where you been? I've been calling you all the time. Turn my call. If I was lucky to catch you the other day, I thought,
between working and handling city business, that's a full-time job.
Yeah,
both of those.
You do spend a lot of time. You are extremely busy, and that's a good thing. And we want to obviously talk about a number of things in city business. There's a special called session Monday. We'll get to that in a moment. We also want to talk about your daughter and the Ride for Katie. Is it called the Ride for Katie? Or
they call it the Viva Katie, yes.
Viva Katie.
Yes.
For those of you who are not familiar, Bill and his wife lost a daughter to cancer about a year or two ago, I think.
It's been 15 months.
And so in her memory, there are all sorts of things going on to remember Katie, to help those who obviously struggle with cancer and so forth.
Yes.
So tell us about, was last year was the first ride, I guess. They rode to Houston, Texas? Or
Austin.
Austin, Texas.
Yes.
And why Austin? I hear Austin's a great city.
Well, the Clarksville High Hope Club, a group of great kids, the teacher, the mentor for the group is Danny McGrons. They had been involved in a number of things sort of related to my daughter before her death, dealing with the Lance Armstrong Foundation, and their headquarters is in Austin, Texas, and that's why Austin is the point they'd ride to from Clarksville. And with it, they had helped her go to the Ride for the Roses, which is held in the fall in Austin, where a lot of the bike riders around the nation who raise money to fight cancer and support the goals of the Lance Armstrong Foundation. They meet, they get to ride with Lance. There's a weekend of activities and stuff all related to riding cancer, bringing in cancer survivors, doctors. Cool. It's just an area to get together, communicate with each other, network, find out what's happening. And so they got involved with Katie back then. My older daughter was in the Hope Club at that time in high school. Katie was still in middle school. So it was our first chance to go down and see that. She had a ball with that, just a great bunch of kids that helped raise money. And then when things took a turn for the worse, and they were looking again to bring up a group of riders, actually ride down to Austin to raise money for that. And then shortly after she died, they basically altered that a little bit, that not only would they raise money for the fight against cancer, but we had proposed a deal of providing a scholarship for kids who had fought cancer or were fighting cancer that were in the Montgomery County school system. We'd been saving a long time when Katie was born and our other daughter to send them to college. That was going to be an expected thing, so we'd been saving money. And sort of seed money, we dumped that money over into a scholarship fund. And Danny McGrons and the Hope Club kids took off with that, and half of their proceeds go to help raise money for the scholarship. And this year, they just closed the door March 15th on those that could apply. The Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee is handling the scholarship for me, and we have two $1,000 scholarships that are available this year.
Anywhere? To use anywhere?
To use anywhere, yes.
All right. How has, when is this next ride? When is?
Right now they're looking that, I think it's around the end of the first week of June, and looking somewhere in the neighborhood of several dozen riders. My older daughter, who will be graduating from UT in about 5 weeks, is going to ride. I'm going to be one of the support parents on this trip. I sort of handled communications back home the last time, so I wanted to go along on this one, and we'll be following much the same route from here to Austin. They took the Natchez Trace Parkway down through Mississippi, across through Louisiana and stuff, and kids had a great time last year.
Well, it's a great adventure, it sounds like, and certainly a great cause, but, man, putting along all that way? I mean, how in the world do you do it?
It's putting if you're
when your kids were little, you're like, are we there yet? And you're like, no, we ain't even got out of the county yet. Not even out of the county. Well, we've been going an hour.
These kids are definitely in better shape. That's when I'm going to drive, and they're going to ride a bicycle. The average speed runs between about 18 and 22 miles an hour on a bike, and you're doing that nonstop for hours on end. That's hoofing it down the road pretty good.
Yeah, but you ain't making no time, Bill. You're not making any time. Well, that's great. How has this ride? How has this effort? How have these kids helped you and your wife, your family, deal with the loss of your daughter? How big has this been for you all to not only day to day relive her memory, relive her life, but day to day deal with the loss of your daughter?
Hank, it's therapy. To know this community, I mean, we heard from people when Katie was fighting her battle and right after she died. I mean, we were on multiple prayer lists at churches. We had multiple cards. Groups would write to Katie, always worried about her, how she was doing. Before Katie was diagnosed, she loved to play softball, and one of the groups, the Austin P girls softball team, had all signed cards and posters and sent them to her. So we had this big old package of all that, and they were rooting her on to get better and get back to playing ball and come out and see them and stuff. And it's hard to describe the community input from your friends, neighbors, people you don't know that worry about you. Mm-hmm. You know, of course, being on the city council, and you were talking to Rick from the electric company. Yeah, there's a lot of people get upset, and you think everybody's always on your case about something. Mm-hmm. That, you know, I'm number one. I've got my own worries. I'm not worried about you. You know, serve mm-hmm. me, do that. Everybody's going to have those moments in time. But when it comes to worrying about people out here, this community is second to none mm-hmm. in their heartfelt worry. They were very supportive. So it's therapy for us mm-hmm. to know that. I always use the example when I talk to people of a stool with many legs, and all these people out there supporting us, worrying us, were extra legs on those stools that help steady us in what was a very difficult time.
Yeah, my experience has been, having buried all my family, is that while you have a certain period of grief and questions of why happened, why me, what you find is, and I try to share, is that, you know, every day of the rest of your life is kind of reliving the lives of your folks, your parents, mm-hmm. your brother who I lost.
Yes.
So their memory and their life, you know, is in front of you every day. It may be because I'm more of a public person than others that I have someone approach me, I know your mama and she did this, or I knew your brother and this and whatever. So yeah, it helps, and it's a beautiful thing, even yes. though selfishly we're awfully sad and heartbroken, you know, when that happens. And I would think that this works kind of the same way with you, with mm-hmm. the outpouring of support and the people who, you know, you don't realize, I don't think, when it comes to children, how many others love those kids. And, you know, they seem to be, my kids are in their 20s, they all seem to be very supportive of one another.
Oh, yes.
Very close. And, you know, they've grown up in an interesting time. And so as a parent, you have this tunnel vision of providing and teaching and raising them right and all that kind of stuff, that something like this happens. You mentioned earlier about worries and concerns and problems. Do you find now that you don't have the same anxieties about the day-to-day problems that you encounter, like money or the city council, for example, or whatever?
You've hit the nail on the head. The things, you know, like you say, you're worried about, I've got to get to work on time. I got to fix the roof. I've got to get the kids to ball practice. A life-changing experience like that puts everything else in perspective, in that when it gets beyond your family and you focus on that, family is number one. The world is not going to know if you didn't get the roof repaired. If I didn't make it to work on time today because I had to take care of my daughter and get her to the hospital or whatever, the world kept spinning. Everybody else kept going on. So you have to focus that in there. I do find myself, whereas I used to fret about a lot of things that I didn't get it done exactly on time, or I didn't get exactly done the way I wanted to. I have a different perspective on that. Not that I still don't care, not that I still don't try, but I have found what's truly important.
Not as big a deal anymore, is it really, as it was before?
The world will keep spinning.
That's right.
Whether I got there exactly on time or got it done to the specs I wanted.
Well, good luck on that.
Thank you.
Certainly her memory is a great thing, and the things that everyone is doing, and the scholarships and the money raised and so forth, is apparently this is where God wants you to be. This is what he wants you to do. And you know, people may search their whole life figuring out, what's my purpose, what's the point, you know, and a lot of times we blindly go and ignore and not really see when it hits you in the face. And so you seem to have accepted that and embraced that, so that's good.
Well, it takes time, and in some cases it feels as fresh as just a few weeks ago, and sometimes it seems like it's been a lifetime ago. But the one thing is, Katie always loved school, And with these scholarships and the support of these great kids, you know, you always hear about how bad kids are. I'll tell you, these kids are super out there, great supporters, worry about each other. But the scholarship is also our way to say thank you to the community. It's frightening to know how many kids in our community here in Montgomery County have fought or are fighting the exact same battle that Katie and we went through. And this is our way to say thank you for worrying about us. If you can make it through this battle, you keep fighting. And it's amazing how many doctors and nurses and other people that we had met and worked with, whose lives had been touched by cancer, and now are in the cancer field because of that.
That's right. 9:19 our time. Bill Summers, our guest, City Councilman, Ward 10, 9, 10?
10.
10, yeah. Yeah, I'm supposed to know that. I appreciate it. I want to talk a little bit about Gas and Water Department.
All right.
You're on the Gas and Water Committee.
Yes.
And recent news of layoffs and, I guess, merging of departments, maybe the sewage treatment plant, gas and water.
Right.
Obviously a tough call for Hickey, Pat Hickey, the mayor, and those who made that call. And then the question of offering service to the county. Let's first talk about the layoffs. There's long been the belief that, you get on with the city, you never lose your job with the city. And while I know government agencies tend to really, really, really go out of their way to never have to let people go, including state government and others, it appears to be was a difficult decision, obviously, to let anyone go. We knew going in when Mayor Piper was elected this second term that there were issues at that utility so far as overhead and so forth. So we have finally come to the point where people who have been there over 20 years lost their job. What were your thoughts on that? What are they going to be doing about that? Are some of those folks going to get rehired into this new organization or what?
I was not in on a lot of the intricate details, but I was aware of some of the actions that were taken. With Mr. Pat Hickey, I know what he was looking at. You brought up when Mayor Piper came in and this particular crew, including myself, came in on the council 2 years ago, we started looking at gas and water. And if you recall back then, there were some positions that were eliminated. We had excess vehicles. We had a gymnasium basically over there, so to speak. There was a lot of things that looked like we were a little heavy on, basically excess personnel, fat, you might say, and some actions were taken then to basically reorganize the function. When Pat Hickey came on, I think roughly 6 months, 8 months later, and came in and looked at it, I know Pat, from his experience, had been comparing what he knew, what he felt needed to be operated, but he wanted to take time and look at how the current operation was going. I think there were some saying, well, this all happened suddenly. Pat had been looking at this for a number of months, basically from the time he got hired, how things were operating here. But he didn't want to take a lot of immediate actions till he fully understood this. He'd watched the operations, went into all the functions, how people were operating, crew sizes, all of that.
Which is what a good manager will do, is obviously get a feel for,
That's right. My own experience is in industrial reorganization, and that's the exact steps you've got to do. You can't come in with a chainsaw and start chopping immediately. You got to sort of see where the lay of the land is first on that. The thing is, Pat had been working on this for months, and the hope is that you can try to make these changes over time. Pat was very concerned about the impact on the employees. But the deal is, you look at the last year, we all got bit with higher, not to knock the electric company, they had to pass on what happened, but we also higher power rates. Gas and Water was no different. Their power rate went up $250,000. So when you're looking at that, you're looking at operations that are not making money, and he could see efficiencies that we needed. We could combine jobs. People could multitask on different things.
Sure.
And when you start looking at that, if you're going to be a prudent manager and you're dealing with ratepayer money right here, you need to be as efficient as possible. And that's what Pat was looking at. So he was hoping to take this over time. But the thing is, we're running out of time. So in terms of trying to make it efficient, in terms of cost analysis,
well,
and it was time to move.
They shouldn't be any different than I guess, real America, what we've been seeing the last 6-8 months, layoffs, pink slips, whatever. There seems to be this impression about oh my God, gas and water laid off 50 people or so forth. And yet every day you read a news story about layoffs over at GM or whoever. I mean, they're all affected, and they have to, and locally there's a lot of that going on. So as while we hate the fact that someone lost their job, and it's not good, and the challenge is to obviously get another job, you have to do what you have to do. Or the other option is, well, I'll tell you what, to save those 54 jobs, we'll increase the rates, say by whatever, 10 cents a cubic foot or whatever, however it is they charge it, and we won't have to let them go. Well, they don't want that either. So how will they integrate back into this reorganization, do you know?
Well, and you used the right term. It's a reorganization. I think it's been hit more heavily that, well, the economy forced this. No, this was coming one way or another. It didn't matter if the economy was running on key, humming like an engine. The thing was, efficiencies needed to be done down here. And so it was reorganized. The primary purpose was to make the organization run better. The economy was an influence on when it did happen on this. Now, right now, as you said, 54 people were told that their current jobs were being eliminated, or their job descriptions were being eliminated. And through some vacancies they currently had, and they've been holding and rewriting others, I think we're looking at 35 potentially could be hired back within that. But now the thing is, as they go through the job interviews, you've got job descriptions, and this is where Pat has tried to work and realign where this work is at, what its duties and job responsibilities will be. Now, the other thing is that when you get past the hopefully 34, 35 that will be hired back in for the job descriptions that are available, we've got job openings in the city. And the next thing will be to try to get those job openings that we have within the city and let these people have first dibs on those jobs right there.
Is that appropriate?
I think so, because the thing is, these people, they're city employees in the sense that, yes, they work for the city of Clarksville, but given they're in gas and water, they're under a different financial picture in that ratepayers pay for that.
But a new job description comes up, it should be open to everyone. And what I was asking was, do they get you said first shot at it or something? If a new job description opens up and say I or Gary or someone wanted to apply for that job, do we have to assume that once you've been through the people that were just reorganized at gas and water, then I may have a shot at it? I was wondering, is
that would be, that's the way I'm understanding it, and personally, given that you had these people as employees, I think it's right there given first shot on that. Because here again, and I know this was a major concern with Pat, is that when I do reorganize these, and he recognizes these have been good workers, there's no question about that. Well, given you've been good workers and you've worked years for the company, so to speak.
Sure. That's understandable.
I think you are due to be first in line for
obviously, you have a track record. You've been a good employee,
that's
obviously.
Right. That's right.
I understand that.
And I think from that standpoint, too, that's what makes it good then when you get past gas and water. If you did not get one of those jobs, we give you first shot at a job within the city then. Because there again, you've proven yourself to be a good worker, and that's what we're after.
Well, the city, Bill Summers, our guest, City Councilman Ward 10, 9:26 our time. It's 41, headed to the low 60s. Should be a great day out this morning. Bill Summers, City Councilman, with us. Council recently approved doing away with the disciplinary panel of 3 people. It was 2 council members and a city employee vehicle pay grade. You voted against that.
Well, I voted.
Why was that?
Well,
I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying you were.
Well, I voted against it not from the sense that I thought the panel was not worth what it used to be.
Right. And you weren't the only one that voted against it, I know, but I was curious.
My angle on that was probably a little different, I believe, from the other 3 council members that voted against it. I wanted to see the panel done away with. What I was looking at, though, I had done some more research, and the state of Tennessee actually has an administrative division, and it's set up with judges that can go out and then hear cases dealing with jobs and discriminations and firings and stuff. And I know with some of the employees there was questions about, okay, the new procedures, which I felt very comfortable with the new procedures are being put in. We're looking at more training of our supervisors. Our new HR director is putting in some needed modifications that I felt very good with. Will White, Lance Baker, our attorney, was getting involved in this. So we were putting some good safeguards, training, and expectations into the system, I think, which would help a lot of future, or eliminate a lot of future problems down the road. The one thing I was looking at, probably in terms of the employees, though, was at some point in time, you always think the system's out to get you. And I'll tell you, sometimes that may happen. The odds are you're going to get hit somewhere where the system's not going to quite catch every inference or every problem out there. And the state, through this administrative division, I actually talked to the chief judge on this. They're sort of like the old traveling judges you see in the cowboy westerns, where they'll come to town, render justice, and they move on to the next spot. They'll look at these cases. And what I had offered for the council to consider was, and I felt it was worthwhile, you could set up with these judges. And while in the instance we're looking at, the mayor would be the final authority on a firing action if it went up through an appeal. Even in the proposal I had, the mayor would still be the final authority. But you could go outside and get the sort of person that had no dog in the fight to take a look at it, that had been other places, seen other things, and could provide you a window as to what they thought. Now, the chief judge had told me, in the majority of times, they always sided usually with the city or the county, whoever they were looking at. But every now and then you might hit that difference where they may not agree. And I felt for the position of the mayor, no matter who the mayor is, that if this judge, with their experience, felt that, okay, maybe something was off, maybe I don't support this in my opinion, it would be another piece of information for the mayor to look at, or our own city attorney or HR to say, okay, why does he see it this way and we didn't? May be valid, maybe not. But it's another piece of information. That's why I had voted against it, because I felt that one extra piece did not dramatically change our ultimate goal.
It seemed like, what's the point?
Well,
I mean, if the executive branch has the ultimate decision, it seemed like, and you are, these are your managers, these are your department heads, and, okay, you can meet, you can hash it out and do this, that, and the other. And I think the idea about, opening up to additional litigation was certainly a valid concern. But if ultimately the recent case of Jeff Burkhart, I mean, that disciplinary, that hearing, that appeals hearing, never went off. I mean, they up and left, the last time, and I'm not going to, bark on that case all day, but ultimately we've seen it done where Mayor Trotter fired John Stanley, and then Mayor Piper came back, transferred Burkhart, and he left, whatever, and didn't want to do this and that, and now we're involved in that lawsuit, hired John Stanley back. So, I mean, you always have this idea or this impression that, well, it's political, this, that, and the other. It is whatever it is. But it seemed like the process, whether it's your idea of an outside set of eyes or whether it was the established appeals hearing, was just sort of a process where, okay, here's what we think, whatever. But ultimately the mayor, the executive, whoever he is, makes the call.
And like I say, this would not have changed that. The mayor, I felt, the mayor leads the city. He has ultimate responsibility for the operation of the city, and I always felt strongly he should have final decision. But I think with any manager, you try to have as much information as possible. And no system's perfect, but I definitely felt the current panel system, I had sat in on several of those panels. I always took it seriously. But I sometimes had the feeling with one of the two of them I sat in that the employee knew they knew they had messed up, and it was sort of like, well, I'll take one more shot, just see if I get lucky, and maybe I'll retain my job. And I felt you're using the panel then, and and the panel's not there to be used or abused in that case. And again, with these judges, I felt with that particular case, that was just one more source or input of information. You always look for validation of any system you input, and my background's in industrial engineering. Is what I'd look at is if we've got this process and it's working well, and if somebody wanted to appeal to this outside judge just to get a feeling, and suddenly they support what we do, or we've done it right, then we've validated our procedure.
Well, it's diaper management. That's covering your butt.
Well,
I guess. Yeah, that's great. And there can be all kinds of ways to do that.
Oh, yeah. Well, in quality control, you always want to produce the same kind of widget at the end of the line.
That's right.
But
well, there's still this. We talked about it earlier. There's still this idea of government employees are treated differently. They're handled differently. They're when we talk about those who lost their job at gas and water, and how government will tend to do all they can in tough times to make sure they don't have to lay anyone off. I think the early retirement incentives was a great idea for some. But, the average Joe, and especially in these days, are like, why should they be treated any different? Performance, overhead, payroll, expenses, income. I mean, if you look at a P&L at the end of the month like I do or anyone else, you understand that, man, I got to cut some things here. And no one's worried about whether or not I let Gary go or if I let go of my producer or cut his pay. So and I don't mean to sound harsh or anything, and we appreciate the city employees and public service without question, but you know, it is a business, and unless we want you to raise our taxes to cover their jobs, like we talked earlier, you know, unless we want that to happen, that's Bill Summers is our guest, and we're going to talk about Monday's executive session, which will deal with the new city charter. Our legislative delegation has made some requests, and we're going to talk about that. Take your calls and comments on anything you may have for Bill. Dunbar Cave. What do you think of that?
That's got a little info.
Yeah, Bill Forrester first told me about that one day over at Moss's. Is that where his office is? Moss? I see him in Moss's all the time. Moss's South.
Bill probably has many offices out there.
I don't doubt it. We'll be back right after this time out. All right, good morning. Welcome back. Bill Summers, our guest. He is City Councilman Ward 10. And to say that he is very diligent in his responsibilities would be an understatement. To say that he is not prepared and has not, you ought to see the stacks of books he's brought in here today. It's amazing. You know, number one, I don't think I'm that smart. Number two, I'm not going to ask you all these kind of questions. You need reference, but it's neat that you brought that. He even brought his Apple. Gary's excited. He's a Mac man.
Mac man, all right.
It's like, so you guys can hang out, go to lunch, do whatever. So, anyway, special session of the City Council Monday to vote on the charter. Let me catch our listeners up to speed. We understand, or I understand, or whatever, the Leaf Chronicle is going to have a story tomorrow about our local legislative delegation and a letter they had sent to the mayor and the city council about some concerns they have about the charter revisions. The Charter Revision Committee, headed by Wallace Redd, worked tirelessly, tons of hours, over a year or so, a couple of years maybe.
It was at least a year and a half.
Bill was on that committee. Updating the charter, something that had been flapped about forever in other administrations and so forth. Finally did it, got it done, brought it to the council, voted on it, cleaned it up, put a document together. Next step, take it to the legislature, which is the responsibility of our delegation in the House and the Senate. A letter was eventually mailed to Mayor Piper, signed off on by Philip Johnson, Curtis Johnson, Joe Pitts, and Tim Barnes, addressing some concerns about the revised charter. And the letter ends with, and I'm not sure if the newspaper's going to have the copy of this letter in there, but the letter ends with the above changes and supporting resolution, we feel comfortable going ahead and filing this legislation in General Assembly, which has to be presented to the Assembly. The Assembly has to approve it. It has to come back to the City Council, and they have to, again, vote on this. They're asking for this current City Council to provide them with a 2/3 majority vote on this new charter. And obviously, Bill, the way I understand it is address these concerns in this letter before they'll feel comfortable moving forward. Is that your understanding?
That's the way I understand it. I've been studying the letter and some of the points that brought up myself. I don't know. On one hand, I can see why they're asking for because we do have 4 new members on the council, and they want to make sure that if they go through this effort, because we have to approve it one more time, and it has to go through by 2/3 vote. But the thing is, the government doesn't stop. We don't call a timeout for 60, 90, 120 days waiting because we're changing regimes or different people are coming on the council. Trying to manage the city or any government entity's got to press on. And we voted this thing through with 2/3 with the council that was in charge, 2/3 of the council that had been there the whole time we've been going through this. And so I felt that was a valid need. But if they...
So that puts you out to put a number of councilmen out that they asked for another vote.
That's the way it looks, and that's fine.
Why do you suppose they did that? Have you talked to any of them?
No, I haven't. I'm not sure why they think... I think I can't remember the exact count on the vote the last time when we passed it. It was...
Like 10-2 or something?
10-2, 11-1. I don't think we had more than 1 or 2 people that might have been concerned about something.
Is it your impression there will be a change in that vote? We have 4 new councilmen, and several of them...
I would not anticipate that.
You need 8 votes.
Right. You got to have 2/3. And the thing is, we went through that thing line by line with every member that was there. It's been available. And there's parts in there when we voted on different sections that we decided to change, modify, add, or delete that we all may or may not have liked. But the overall document, that's what you got to look at, is a major improvement. I mean, I think it'd been over 50 years since the last time this thing had been totally reworked. It had been sections updated. We had stuff that was no longer legal that was still in there.
Well, should we assume that they're just going to buy into what you decide on? I mean, they have to hang their vote and reputation on, you know, getting it to the legislature. I mean, the rest of the legislature is going to look at it and say, okay, guys, what do you think? They give it thumbs up, thumbs down, get a thumbs up. And then it turns out, you know, there may have been some issues. I mean, obviously their reputation and their involvement in the legislature is all. I talked with everyone except Joe Pitts on this issue yesterday, and that's kind of the impression I get, and we'll talk about more of that in a moment. But did you think that, you know, that they were going to just sort of, you know, go along with what you all had done and leave it at that, or that they were just going to take it and do what they're supposed to do and get it through the legislature? Is that what your impression?
Well, my impression would have been that they would do what they need to do on their side of the fence. I don't expect them just to rubber stamp it. We knew it was going to go through a legal review at the state level, and that's what it's been done. But some of the comments that have come back, as far as I'm looking at, there's one or two areas that look like may have a legal question to them.
You talking about in the letter?
Yes.
Okay.
In the letter, there's one or two things to me, and that's the number. That was when the committee was put together, and as we went through this thing line by line, and we went through this thing 3 times. When we finished, we went back over and looked at what we had done again. And paramount in every one of those are we in accordance with state law or federal law or whatever, whoever's law needs to be that's above us? And we had 3 lawyers in this group that spent a considerable amount of time, a lot more even than we did as members of the panel, to go over this stuff. And they were working with MTAS, who is sort of the giant library of municipal knowledge on how they did things. We talked with other legal representation. So from a legal standpoint, I felt very confident that we had done a good job. Now, everybody has opinions, and if this particular legal review from this lawyer at the state had some questions, that's fine. We'll look at that, and our legal guys. But to me, it looked like there were about 1 or 2 of those, and the rest of these look like opinion to me.
All right, let's catch our listeners up to this. And again, it's my understanding the Leaf Chronicle is doing a story on this whole deal tomorrow, because it is also our understanding that the Leaf Chronicle had gotten a copy of this letter several days before the mayor and the city council got it. And that's been a real point of contention with the mayor's office and a number of city council members. But that notwithstanding, there is an attorney, a legislative staff attorney, who is referenced in the letter named Sally Swaney. I spent an hour on the phone with her yesterday. And after getting past the argument of attorney-client privilege, which I fully understand, she works for the legislature. They're her clients, and she wasn't quite comfortable in what it was that she could actually speak to without having the 4 legislative delegates give the okay. And so what we eventually ended up doing was I had her explain to me what was her role in this. Her name is Sally Swaney. She has worked on some 30 years in state government. She is an expert on charter revisions and community charters, if you will. And she explained to me yesterday that there are 5 points of concern in this letter that was mailed to the mayor. And she said that those 5 points were simply differences between the old charter and the new charter. She also put together a table, and she went down item by item on this table, which I have a copy of, and the paper may print it tomorrow, I don't know. But she went down line by line item or whatever and compared the old and the new charter. It's her opinion, and what she told me on the record was that the things that are in the letter that the delegation sent to the mayor were simply the differences between the old charter and the new charter. Now, with that said, there's an email that the city attorney had sent to her concerning the changes that were outlined in the letter. Lance Baker, who is our city attorney, and there's David Silvas, who was the interim attorney at the time.
He was also on the committee.
On the committee. They outlined some of the points that you make as follows, and I'm not going to read all of those at the moment, but I will sum up his letter, which said that I believe this is an accurate summary of your positions as you explained to the mayor, myself, and David Silvas. I sent this email simply to request your confirmation of your position as stated above with regard to the items contained in the letter from our local legislative delegation. Thank you for your time and consideration. Her response was, where is it? Her response was that she cannot make comment on that without permission from the delegation. So it's a matter of opinion, apparently, as to whether or not the suggestions they have made are her suggestions or her opinions or the opinion and suggestion of our delegation. Now, I spoke with Senator Tim Barnes and Curtis Johnson, our state representative, and Philip Johnson, who said that he didn't have much to say because obviously he doesn't represent a whole lot of whatever the county. Joe Pitts was the only one of the four that I was not able to reach yesterday, and numerous attempts to get a comment about this and that and the other. Curtis Johnson was comfortable with the fact that he simply asked her, and now the mayor tells me that they did not have this conversation yesterday, but that he had told the mayor that there were some things in there that they felt a bit uncomfortable with, and we needed a plan B. That was what Curtis told me, that we needed a plan B. There is one item in this letter in particular that seems to come out more than others, and that is the change in the charter bill that you all, and you led the fight on this, that the veto power is changed to a 2/3 vote for an override of the mayor's veto. And it had always been a simple majority.
Correct.
And she, Sally Swain, and Curtis, and Senator Barnes all told me that nobody in the state, no government in the state has that. And the mayor's point was, so what? I mean, we worked on it, we voted on it, this is what we want, this is what we did, this and the other. That's a good point. The other being, as the attorney and Curtis Johnson told me yesterday, was, state government, which allows local governments to govern, is not going to let, obviously, local governments supersede or, I guess, vary from the state law that they operate under. Now, that's, I guess, a point of debate, in your opinion.
Well, yes. The goal, as we rewrote the charter and revised it, was we wanted to be in accordance with all the latest state statutes and laws. And here again, for your conversations with them, is, well, nobody else does this. Well, my question is, give me verse, title, and chapter of state law that we violated with this request.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're going to have a hard time proving that based on the comments that are there. The other thing is, for my part, I tried to look at other governmental organizations beyond local and state when you looked at veto and some of the other aspects within the charter here. If you're talking about a mayor, I don't care if it's a mayor, state governor, whatever. See, I think it's if I was a state governor, I think if I did a veto, it should take more than a simple majority at the state level to overturn that. Because if that's something I felt strong enough about, that I felt was going the wrong way for the state government, or in the case here in Clarksville for local government, then it ought to be a solid majority that'll override my veto saying, no, we think it is that important that this will be approved, disapproved, or whatever the case is. And because the thing is, why have a veto? If it takes a simple majority to pass anything, and if a simple majority is going to override a veto, well, let's just take it out of the books completely. We don't need a veto, because if a simple majority passed it to start with, it's done.
All right, as she explained to me yesterday, you have the three branches of government. On page 12 of the Perfect World book, I always reference that. In fact, Gary asked me the other day, where the hell can I get that book? I ain't never seen that book. As she explained to me, and we need to understand, you have the three branches of government, which is the executive, the judicial, and the legislative branch. And apparently the balance of power is important. And as an attorney, I was understanding what she was telling me. Mm-hmm. And she was of the opinion that that changes that a bit to the executive branch. Now, meaning if a veto only took a simple majority and you're asking for a 2/3 majority, then that's a huge shift in the balance of power. Because even though in this case it's only one vote, that could be a big deal.
Well,
I mean, that could be a really big deal in the sense that if the simple majority was a 7-5 vote, you end up with a 6-6 vote. Well, obviously, the mayor is going to, vote in favor. So you have that. So that extra vote, could be incumbent on the council to rope somebody in to override the veto. You know what I'm saying? So the impression is that does shift. Mayor Piper feels as though it is a personal affront from a couple of representatives up there who he has a history with. But he's most concerned about the fact that the council, members like yourself, spent a long time working on this deal.
Right. Well, I'd have to ask the state representatives and the lawyer that looked at that. Well, then they must have a problem with how the federal government does it, because 2/3 overrides a presidential veto. Mm-hmm. So it's not like we have invented something that nobody else in the world has seen or does. And
I just want to touch on the things that they recommended in their letter. The letter was dated March 10th, sent to the Honorable John Piper, and I'm assuming that all council members got a copy of this, or did the mayor provide this to you?
No, I received a copy, and I believe the others had received a copy.
All right. The concerns they have deal with employee at will, some language change in the employee at will, Article 8, or is it 8, Section 10, whatever. Although employee at will may have some advantages, contrary to language provided by Tennessee Code, should be changed to comply with state law. Again, we're back to this, what she told me yesterday about state law and so forth.
I think in that section, I can't remember, we talked about they work hour to hour, day to day, week to week, which makes you an at-will employee.
Right.
So, why beat around the bush? And I remember we talked on that specifically for a little while in the committee meetings. And, I think horse is a horse in this case. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure.
All right. The second item was in Article 2 that applies to the removal of public officials from office. We feel this is contrary to state law and should be made to comply with state law. This is the second item that needs to comply with state law. Article 3, the third concern was the veto powers we mentioned. To override a mayor's veto, it takes a simple majority. Now the new charter says 2/3 to do that. And number 4, it may be that the charter could be improved by listing specifically the items required to be passed by ordinance and the items be passed by resolution and so forth. That seems like a minor point. And then finally, in Article 6, Section 1, the proposed charter gives the mayor the authority to abolish, consolidate, or reorganize departments. We believe this should be done by ordinance. All right, knowing the personalities involved in this whole thing, it's easy to look at some of these things and think, okay, some of our representatives, some of our delegation, they're shoving their weight around a little bit, personally to the mayor, who obviously Piper and them have a bit of history. I addressed that with Curtis Johnson yesterday. He said he was so over that. As you may recall, when Piper was elected the first time, Curtis was not made mayor pro tem. Now, I've known Curtis all my life, and he told me yesterday it doesn't bother him. And we all know the history that he has with Joe Pitts and former Mayor Trotter and so forth and so on. Now, they all deny that. Again, I did not speak with Joe Pitts, but they all denied that had anything to do with it. But yet, when you read this and see it, and all the work you did on the charter, I was under the impression, I had lunch with a gentleman yesterday who was of a different opinion, that, you did all this work, you gave it to him, okay, you do your job and just take it to the legislature as you're supposed to or as you're required to, and so forth. What they told me was, well, yes, we're supposed to do that, but we have to deal with the legislature. We have to deal with each other. I mean, you're dealing with Republicans, Democrats in our delegation. And so do you buy that?
Only so far.
Do you buy that they need to be comfortable with what they're going to take up there, that the legislature asks them, what do you think, to give thumbs up, and yet there are problems?
I think they need to be comfortable what we send up, yes. But on the other hand, as long as they're comfortable, I don't think somebody in the furthest northeast county of Tennessee is going to worry about, well, if they're comfortable here, I'm not going to sweat it, because I doubt if everybody's reading every one of these charters or changes that comes through like that. They're relying on them. So yes, I want them to be comfortable, but my viewpoint is they need to be comfortable from a standard of state law. If I look
That's
at
what they identified. They said some of these need to comply with state law, and you disagree with that.
I think there's maybe 2 there's question about, and I'm all for it. Let's just yank those out. Let's take a look at them. And what does state law say, and what do we say? But a couple of examples you had on there, Hank, was we think that you should list every kind of item to what should be a resolution, what should be an ordinance. We had that listing in there now, and you can't list everything in the world that could be a resolution or an ordinance. And we put basically generic wording in that if it's regulatory, it's going to be an ordinance because it has to be voted on twice. That's pretty easy to divide up right there. Everything else will be resolution.
And you wonder, why would they be concerned about that?
That's the question.
A lot of that jumps out at me, and again, it's not important. It's only important that I understand what's going on and be able to report the facts. It's only important that, again, those of you who are on the council and those of them who are in the state legislature understand what, number one, it takes to get it through the legislature and to make sure they understand it, so forth, and what you understand as to what they're concerned about. And there has to be a happy medium, and I feel confident that you are going to do that. Now, I don't know how long it's going to take Monday, but I can assure you that over the next couple of days that local politics are going to rear their ugly head, and that's going to just thrill the story chatters beyond belief. I go back to this letter that City Attorney Lance Baker had sent to Sally Swaney. Well, I keep calling her Swaney. Delightful lady. Lord have mercy, I need to get her for an interview. She's just a talker. But he had sent her asking of these concerns in this letter were of her opinion or were they her observations. And here's the response. I couldn't find it earlier. She said, as I only take my direction to discuss legal matters with the members of the General Assembly as well as my director, I know you're well aware of my discomfort in replying to this email without some authorization to do so. I'll forward the email to the members who represent Clarksville, blah, 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 and so on and so on. And that's understandable. I understand. Attorney-client privilege, it's a huge net. And I understand that. But I think the representatives need to be accountable for what's in this letter. And I think they are. And again, I talked to Tim Barnes. Tim Barnes is new. He's a great guy. I really like Tim Barnes. He's learning his way around. And he is in a position to where I want to work with everyone. I'm going to want to get things done, and I need this, that, and the other. Curtis Johnson has been there for a long time. Curtis wants to be Speaker of the House one day. I understand that. And, that's okay. And I think they have done a great job. This is a great community. Look around and see. And in not being able to talk to Joe Pitts, I couldn't get his opinion on what all this was about. But I will tell you that we in the media, we love getting stories. We don't care where we get them. We check them out, we broadcast. So somebody brings me a letter, so be it. What happened in this case, unfortunately, was from what we know, we've talked to several people involved, that it got to the media before the mayor did, and I think that's a little out of whack. I think that's unfortunate. All right, let's take a call. Good morning. Hello, JCM.
Yes, good morning, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to address or ask a question of Mr. Summers. Mr. Summers, good morning.
Good morning.
Councilman Summers, I'm sorry. I read the article in the paper yesterday about your discussion or feelings or ideas or what have you on this Clarksville gas and water policy. Providing services to people that live outside of the city limits. And I don't know if I understand it right, but it seems to me like you don't think that's a very smart move to be doing this. And I say this because of two things. The people that live in the county don't pay any city taxes. The people that live in the city pay both city and county taxes, and they are also ratepayers. We keep building and building and building. Are you saying that we're building all these new houses outside of the city limits or within the city limits? Because if it's within the city limits, we don't need to be making any more money. We're making money right now. There was a person, I believe Mr. Allen, Councilman Allen says, we're losing money if we don't extend our services out. But
all right, I hate to cut you off, but I'm about running out of time. We quickly want to talk about that, and we don't have much time, though, but giving services to the county, they pay for it. Why don't we want to do that?
Well, they say we're paying for it. We're making money on it. I'm not exactly sure we're making as much money as they think.
All right.
And the thing is, I want to make sure we are getting our money's worth. And the other thing is, I'm looking at development within Clarksville, their city department. I think they ought to be making actions that improve the assets of the city.
Bill, thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. I've run out of time here. I've got to get to the network breaks, but thanks so much for coming in. Be watching these stories develop over the next couple of days. Council meets Monday for a vote on its new charter. There is some discussion and apparently some disagreement with our legislative delegation about the new charter. We'll see how that plays out. We'll be talking about that in the coming days. Bill, and good luck with the run, the ride, the bike ride, and all that, and God bless you and your family. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's our show for today.